Hi there, I'm Fredrick Groves, your local Comparion insurance agent, and I'm starting a new series that I'm going to call Family Talk because I've been in business now long enough to have a collection of topics that I need to discuss with you guys and that I really need for you to take to heart. Insurance is a pretty serious thing, and I think that most people miss just how serious it is. So today what I want to cover is three things or three coverages on your auto insurance that you don't ever want to skimp on. You know, oftentimes I will ask folks, how much bodily injury liability coverage do you have? And do you know how it works to protect your family? And oftentimes they will reply with, well, we have full coverage. Or they'll say, oh, well, we have state minimum. But rarely do they ever know for sure. Rarely do they ever say, I have 100, 300, 100, right? Or I have 250, 500, 100. So that's the reason that I want to have this talk tonight, because way too often I encounter people who have assets. They have a home. They have vehicles, right? They have money in the bank. They have W-2 income. They even have 1099 incomes. These are all assets that are up for grabs if you have an auto accident and you're underinsured. So the first role of bodily injury liability coverage on your auto policy is simply to protect your assets. I'll use myself as an example. 12 years ago, I was rear-ended by a lady. Sent me to the hospital. I spent a week there. When I left the hospital, I left with a $40,000 medical bill. But that's not all, guys. I had 24 chiropractor visits. I had medication. I had physical therapy. I had pain and suffering. I had missed work. And I hired a good attorney, so there were attorney fees. All said and done, well over $150,000. But this young lady only had state minimum, $25,000 of bodily injury liability coverage if she injured one person, and thank God that's all that she injured, $50,000 if she injured more than one person. So what happens when you cause an accident and you do more bodily injury than your policy provides for you? This is where people will usually say they can't get blood from a turnip. Well, they can actually. They can get blood from a turnip, and it's called a garnishment. When that lawsuit is filed and you're found liable for causing that bodily injury, they can take up to 25% of your after-tax income to settle that lawsuit. Now look, I'm not proud about it, but 12 years later, that lady is still making payments. Every month, me and Kevin Kurgis gets a check, and it could have all been avoided. The difference between state minimum, which is simply $25,000 of bodily injury liability coverage if you injure one person, $50,000 of bodily injury liability coverage if you injure more than one person, and $25,000 of property damage coverage. But that's not the focus of our talk today. Really, the focus of our talk today is that part of the state minimum coverage that leaves your assets exposed. The second area that you never want to skimp on when it comes to your auto insurance is your medical payments coverage. This takes care of any passengers that are in the car when there's an accident, and they are covered whether you're at fault or the other driver is at fault. Now just picture this. You're on your way to a picnic, or Zumbizi Bay or church even, right? You're just going out with the girls to hang out. There's an accident. There's 3 or 4 of you in the vehicle. Ribs are broke. Leg is sprained. Folks are hurt. They end up with a medical bill. Who do you think they expect to pay that? They expect you to pay it. And if you only have $500 or $1,000 in medical payments coverage, I want to ask you this. How much is that relationship worth to you? Do you realize that instead of $1,000 worth of medical payments coverage, you could have had $10,000 or even $25,000 worth of medical payments coverage for pennies more a day? The third area, and if the first 2 areas don't get you, perhaps this one will. If you insist on driving with state minimum coverage, do you realize that that's all you're covered for? In the state of Ohio right now, at least according to AAA, from a recent research that they conducted, something like 37% of the people on the roads in the state of Ohio have no insurance. They are riding dirty. And if you factor in another 17 to 20% of drivers who are underinsured, that means that at any stoplight, if you were to count 4 cars, you'd probably have to just pick 2 out that are underinsured or uninsured. And if you have an accident with them, all that you're covered for is whatever coverage you're protecting the other guy's family with. So if you have state minimum coverage, that's all that you're covered for. I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, but when I'm in the hospital, if I have to go to the hospital, I don't want to be in there pinching pennies. That is the wrong time to tell doc, don't do this, don't do that, because you're over concerned with how much proper medical care is going to cost you. So before I go and conclude my first family talk, I want to ask you guys this. When you went to dinner last Friday, did you ask for the cheapest steak? When you took your last vacation, did you tell the travel agent that you wanted the minimum? And I could go on and on with examples of where we spare no expense. So why is it then that we will get in our car, which is really a missile with brakes and a steering wheel, and we will put our family and our lives in jeopardy, but we will insist on state minimum coverage? Guys, I tell you, if you could sit where I sit for just about a week, I believe you would leave state minimum alone. And it really doesn't cost much more to have the right coverage. Now, full disclosure, I'll tell you right now, since my accident, I've never carried state minimum. I've never carried state. I'm just not a minimum type of guy. I carry $250, $500, $250 with $1 million umbrella. Do I have $1 million at stake? Nope. But it didn't cost much more to me than state minimum. But boy, I sure sleep so much better at night knowing that if there was an accident, I'm very well covered, and so is anyone that I might injure. My name's Fredrick Groves. I'm your local Comparion insurance agent, and this is episode 1 of Family Talk. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Please, protect your family the right way. Drive with something other than state minimum coverage, because it's just a disaster waiting to happen.